from Myanmar. Anybody from Myanmar? Because we register participant also not here from Myanmar.
Femang maybe.
Yes, somebody from Myanmar. Can you say hello to us?
Hello, Pak Andi.
Oh, hello. How are you? Glad to see you today.
Yeah.
I hope everything all right in Myanmar, right?
Hope so.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Have a good time. And yeah, we have 6 countries who join in this activity today, and we are very glad because so many participants. If we check here, 188 institutions join with us, yeah, including university, NGO, and also cross department, yeah, in the national level, also in the local level. We are glad that we have very wide range of participants today. Yeah, I don't know. Is there Professor Samrik and Achan Anurat also here? Achan Anurat?
Yes, I also here.
Glad to see you. This the head of department in Burapa University. How are you, Achan Anurat?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Glad to see you. Are you health condition?
Oh, so healthy. Okay.
Maybe if there is no COVID again, I will visit Burapa to teach again. Yeah.
Sure. So me, I will go to Bodawicaya. Sure.
Yeah, you come here to teach again here. Yeah, to give a lecture in Luring. Yeah, not only in Daring.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody in this room.
Yeah, sure. You can say hello to anybody here. Please say hello.
Yeah, say hello. Good afternoon for everybody in this room.
Yeah.
Hello, Achan Anurat.
Yeah, Pak Oscar.
Okay. Kita mulai sekarang. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. We can start now. Putri ya.
Oke, Pak Andi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who are in Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Myanmar, and Nepal. And good morning for Dr. S.E. Hayat in England, UK. Welcome to the third International Joint Lecture hosted by Public Administration Department, Faculty of Administrative Science, Brawijaya University, in collaboration with Teesside University, UK, Burapa University, Thailand, and National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia, or BNPB. Before we start the lecture, I'd like to say thank you to the Dean of Faculty of Administrative Science. Unfortunately, Professor Bambang cannot be here today. And also, I would say thank you to the head of Public Administration Department, Professor Andi Wijaya, who led us to organize this event. I also would like to say thank you to all speakers who already with us today virtually. For today's lecture, we are having 4 speakers. The first is Dr. S.E. Hayat from Teesside University, UK. Good morning, Dr. S.E. Hayat.
Good morning. Good morning, Mrs. Tri.
Thank you for joining us. The second is Dr. Nopawan Bengpa from Burapa University, Thailand. Hello, Dr. Nopawan. So glad to have you here.
Yes, hello, Putri. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the third speaker is Insinyur Dodi Ruswandi, MSCE from BNPB Indonesia. Good afternoon, Mr. Dodi.
Afternoon, Putri. Happy to join here.
And the last is Mr. Oscar Randiandana, PhD from Brawijaya University, Indonesia. Good day, Mr. Oscar.
Good day, Ibu Dr. Timiani and all participants.
And sorry, thank you very much to all guests and participants for joining us today. We are so glad that there are many participants who come across the world, not only from Indonesia, but also from Thailand, Philippines, Nepal, Myanmar, and also Cameroon. More than 1,100 participants from 188 institutions are already registered for this event. And we are happy to host all of you virtually, of course, and hope all of you will enjoy the event today. Okay, we will start this lecture with dua or prayer. So I would like to invite Dr. Ainul Hayat to read the dua for us.
Thank you, Putri. Ladies and gentlemen, let us bow our head of a moment, pray to God Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, so that our international joint lecture can be precious to all of us. I will lead this prayer based on the teaching of Islam, and those who are not Muslim, you are pleased to pray according to each of your beliefs. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wabihi nasta'inu ala umuriddin waddin. Allahumma inna nas'alukal huda wat tuqa wal afafa wal ghina. Rabbi zidna ilma warzuqna fahma. Rabbi shrah lana sadrana wa yassir lana amrana wahlul 'uqdatan min lisanana yafqahu qawlana. Oh Allah, today we gather here to bring about an international joint lecture on disaster management. Make this international joint lecture as a useful science assembly, as a medium of sharing useful ideas, knowledge, and experiences of scholars, researchers, and students of various disciplines. May the international joint lecture we organize today benefit to our life, broaden our knowledge, shine our ideas, and lead us to be successful, productive persons, which in turn will boost dignity of our nation. Oh Allah, guide and bless our health and our means with the light of your guidance. Protect us from unintended temptation, show us the right path, and give us knowledge and strength to perform good things. Equally, show us and make it clear the bad thing and give us knowledge and strength to avoid them. Oh Allah, you are the one of who can fulfill our dua. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Amin, amin. Thank you very much, Dr. Ainul Hayat, and continue to the next agenda. I would like to invite Professor Andi Vistawijaya to deliver the opening speech and then officially open this international joint lecture event. Professor Andi, time is yours.
Thank you, Putri. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, Sawadee-Krap. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Brawijaya, who is currently on duty to attend a meeting in People Consultative Assembly in Jakarta, or we call it MPR RI, and all participants. We are pleased today become the host of the virtual International Joint Lecture 3 conducted by Department of Public Administration, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Brawijaya, in collaboration with Teesside University, UK, Burapa University, Thailand, and National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia, BNPB. The internationalization, particularly cooperation with other university at international level, is one of the faculty vision and the university vision. So I calculate that this is the third international joint lecture in these years. We already conduct until this month, and also the fifth international activity altogether in our department. So we hope for the next agenda, we will still meet all of you here for the next agenda or the new theme that we will conduct for the future. And therefore, it is always excellent that our faculty collaborate with those institutions is one prominent institution to conduct this event. It is our pleasure to welcome our keynote speakers who share their valuable knowledge and vast experience expertise regarding the topic. Dr. Ezri Hayat, Magister Engineering Science, Master Engineering Science, Desailly University, UK. Dr. Nopawan Puangpua, Master of Public Administration from Burapa University, Thailand. Insinyur Dodi Ruswandi, MSCE, National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia. And Oscar Radian Danar, MAP PhD, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Brawijaya. And moderator who will lead this event, Dr. Triyumarni from Public Administration Department, Universitas Brawijaya. Thank you to all members of event organizer who already contribute to this event, the Dream Team. We are very glad for your work today. We are happy and then well done job that you did today. And we see here also the participants come from 6 countries today. First from Cameroon, second from Myanmar, third from Philippines, 4 from Thailand, 5 from Nepal, and then 6 from Indonesia. So 6 countries already participate today in this occasion. I think that's very good broad discussion today. And then they come from 188 institution, 188 institution, including from Indonesia and other outside Indonesia. And in total, registered participant is 1,130, the registered participant today. So some of them join in the YouTube link, and some of them join in the Zoom link. But many of our students, we ask them to join in the YouTube, because otherwise the capacity in Zoom link will be overloaded. So half of them in the YouTube link. And everybody come here today. The most participant come from Universitas Brawijaya, about 669 participants come from Brawijaya. And the second biggest number of participants come from Burapa University. Welcome student or academician, lecturer from Burapa University. Is calculate the total number from Burapa University, 166. Kopkunka to come today. Thank you very much. And then the third number, it's Universitas Maritim Raja Ali Haji, 19 participants. And then Universitas Nasional, 19 participants. And BNPB also come with the 5 highest number of participants, 14 member of BNPB, or from the National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia. Thank you to participate in this activity. And all across the participant, they come from most of them from institution, from university, most of them, but several of them also from ministerial level of department, in the national level or in the local level. And such as we can see here, yeah, some of them come from pemerintah DKI Jakarta, ya, Pemda, ya, local government from Jakarta, ya. Jakarta is what is it? DKI Jakarta, ya, and some of them also come from national department, yeah, ministerial department, and some of them also from NGO, non-government organization, also involved in this activity. So very broad participant come today, yeah. And in occasion, this virtual international joint lecture topic is disaster management. This topic is interesting because many government and organizations around the world still currently fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, as we witness today. Yeah, still ongoing process, ongoing occasion today. We struggle with COVID-19 pandemic as one of notorious disaster and many catastrophic natural disaster in recent years. Since the disaster management is kind of interdisciplinary science, then the discussion in this lecture will not limit it to a certain context. Yeah. However, it will emphasize on theory and practice of public administration. Public governance refers to formal and informal arrangements that determine how to manage the public sector based on constitutional values. In the context of disaster management, this means every country has formal and informal arrangement to deal with disaster occurring on each region. Therefore, the disaster management approach will be relevant and exciting to develop in this discussion. Referring to disaster management scope, the cycle of its conceptual discussion involving mitigation and prevention, preparedness, early warning, disaster phenomena, yeah, impact assessment, response, recovery, and reconstruction. Therefore, based on a public administration exposure, it will be related to managerial and operational attribute of public sector, including how to find the most suitable decision to solve disaster risk problem. Finding the valuable policy with effective and efficient resources allocation, managerial operation, as well operational issues. We look forward to hear from presenters, discussions, all participants. We will have fruitful and rewarding exchange at this virtual international joint lecture. We want to express our thanks to the committee that organized this critical important international joint lecture. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Professor Andi Vesta Wijaya. And now we move to the main session, the lecture. Okay, my name is Tri Yumarni and will serve as a moderator for this lecture. And I will explain the order of the lecture today. The order of the lecture is as follows. We will have presentation from 4 speakers first, and the discussion will be done after it. And the time for each presentation is around 20 minutes, and I will give reminder 3 minutes before the time has run out. If any of you, the audience and the participant have questions, please write down your question in the chat box for audience in Zoom meeting or in comment section for you who are joining us in YouTube. And please don't forget to write your name and institution and also to whom the question is addressed. And later in this discussion session, I will read it for you. And we will finish this lecture at 4:30 p.m. sharp because today some of us is fasting, so before iftar time we need to finish this lecture. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of today's lecture is disaster management. Nowadays, it is commonly known that the occurrence of disaster, both natural and man-made disaster, is increasing and affected many people's lives around the world. And the newest one which we experienced is the earthquake that happened in Malang a few weeks ago. And to reduce the risk and the impact of this disaster, we need to take more action together involving all components within society, state government, private sector, academia, communities, and mass media. And this lecture is one of our little contribution as academia through sharing knowledge and also experience from experts and practitioners. It is very important to increase our awareness for building resilient communities. All the speakers are here with us virtually will share their knowledge and experience in disaster management. Okay, we will start the lecture with the presentation from Dr. Esri Hayat from Deeside University, UK. And here is his brief biography before I will read before Dr. Esri Hayat can start his presentation. Dr. Esri Hayat completed his undergraduate education in Trisakti University, Indonesia, and his master's degree from New South Wales University, Australia, and then finished his PhD from University of Salford, UK. He started his career in Aceh, worked for several post-disaster projects such as UN Habitat, GTZ project, and many more. After he finished his doctoral degree in UK, he worked as researcher in University of Salford and University of Huddersfield, UK. And then moved to the Deeside University as a lecturer there, and also doing some research in the Faculty of Engineering in Deeside University. Dr. Esri Hayat also did and still doing various research with topic varies from project management, post-disaster reconstruction, disaster management, and construction management. In addition, Dr. Esri Hayat is a member of Chartered Institute of Building or FIA-UB, and also a member of Indonesian Disaster Management Expert Association or IAB, Ikatan Ahli Bencana Indonesia. His achievement including publishing his research in various indexes journals, Scopus, and else. And for today's lecture, Dr. Esri Hayat will deliver a presentation with title Making Cities Resilient Campaign, Integrating Resilience into Public Administration. Okay, I'd like to invite Dr. Esri Hayat to share his knowledge with us. Dr. Esri Hayat, time is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, clearly. Yeah, we can hear clearly.
Can you see my screen as well?
Yes, we can see clearly as well.
Okay, I will start then. Thank you very much for the opportunity for having me in this lecture. I feel very honored to be in this platform and to be aligned with the faculty who is organizing this. I chose this topic, which is one of the campaign run by UNDRR, the United Nations for Disaster Risk Reductions, which is the Making Cities Resilient campaign, the campaign that has run for more than 10 years now. Okay, without further ado, let's start the lecture. So disaster risks in city. Why do we focus on the city, on the urban area for this campaign, and why the United Nations DRR chose city as the focus of the disaster risk reductions campaign? One that we need to really understand that rapid urbanization in cities are increasingly and developing rapidly. And one of the impact, if we look at how the industrial revolutions are affecting or impacting the development of areas, particularly urban areas, this is also taking place in cities around the world where people are flocking area where economic activities are taking place. Yeah. Economic activities are taking place where more than 3 billion people now, or half the world, are living in the urban area. And this is only expected that by the middle of the 21st century, urban population will just double that. So, okay, this is why cities is very, very important to focus on. Follow with that, particularly in the what do you call the developing countries, in the developing nations, the weak urban governance just make this worse. Okay, just make this worse because in high income nations, infrastructure and institutions help reduce risk from disaster and disaster impact. However, where countries have a weak urban governance, such infrastructures and buildings just make the city worse in terms of disaster hazard. And obviously, one of the issues that we come across in most or many developing countries is that the urban development is improperly or inappropriately planned for midterm and longer terms. And the challenges posed by the rapid growth of many cities and the decline of others will just make this worse. And many cities in Latin America, for example, have doubled their size of the city, but it may not necessarily be aligned with what it should be in terms of developing an urban area. Many cities that rapidly growing, they will have problem with slum area, informal settlement, and this is primarily affected by the lack of available land for low-income citizens. Land in these bursting or growing population cities are very expensive, and therefore this will be accompanied by the emergence of a slum area, informal settlement in places which are not supposed to be lived in. And obviously comes with that also inappropriate constructions, because they do not have they are not well supervised for the reconstruction, for the construction of that area. And cities also a concentration of economic assets, and this is particularly why people are coming to the city in the first place. And the issues that also mainly found in cities area are that the ecosystem decline. The ecosystem decline because lands are being used for new buildings, lands are being taken for new infrastructures area, and many cases that this is contradictory to green environment and green development, if you like. Yeah. And if we look at this table here, 10 most populous cities and associated disaster risk, I'm taking this from UNISDR website. We can see that Jakarta included there for Indonesia. And we see that most of these 10 most populous cities, all of them are exposed to different type of disaster risk. Okay, and this is particularly why government at the local level need to pay attention to and start working on reducing risk disaster in this area. So that's why the Making Cities Resilient campaigns were launched and still run to help ensure that these activities, this campaign can help reduce the number of victims, the number of losses should disaster happen, and prior to that, reduce the consequences and probability of occurrence as well. Okay, so what is the Making Cities Resilient campaign is about? So this campaign is where cities, towns, and any other type of local government, including regions, to take action to become resilient to disaster. Okay? And this campaign was initiated by UNISDR It's what it's called. Now it is called UNDRR. And the aim is to raise awareness of the local government, the community, by urging them to take immediate actions and to build a multi-stakeholder partnership. Yeah, and this is through one of their motto or ideas that educating local government, educating the local stakeholders to know more about the area, to know more about risks in their area. And then following that is the investment. Okay, so educating them and then guide them to invest wisely, identifying budget allocations to invest in disaster risk reduction activities. Okay? And as a result of this investment, then this local government will also build more safely. Yeah. And for the first round of the campaign in the last decade, the first 2 years when it was launched in 2010, 2011, they call it the My City is Getting Ready. There's a lot of documents issued or launched or published to help cities to get ready for this campaign and to get ready for what you call refurbishing, if you like, the public administrations, repair or improve or upgrade the existing building regulations. And between 2010 and 2020, in the last 10 decades, there are over 4,300 cities signing up to the MCR campaign. And when we keep saying making cities resilient campaign, what is actually disaster resilient city? What is the end conditions that is expected from this campaign, and how do we know that city has become a resilient city? And UNDRR give a guidance of some sort of not really definitions, like indications when we can start thinking or seeing that a disaster is becoming more resilient. One of them is where people participate, decide, and plan their city together with the local government. So there's a close collaborations, the close participation between not only the government and government departments, but also with the community, with the associations and society that is available in that area, all the stakeholders. And another indication that a city will need to have a competent and accountable local government. And this local government are looking after the sustainable urbanizations with obviously participation from all group of stakeholders. And another indication that UNDRR also highlight is that many disasters should have been avoided because the whole populations live in safe homes, safe neighborhood. Okay, so how do we do that? How do UNDRR achieve that? What do they do? So some of the activities that they formulate to achieve this is by organizing a policy dialogue and workshop, including other events as well, where what they're trying to do is raise the profile of urban risk issues, make people aware, make governments aware that there is a big issues in urban areas. Okay, and this also create political space among different stakeholders. So political attention is very important, as what we might find out later in my slide, that political attention to this issue is very important because political conditions, political stability affect this campaign, affect disaster risk reduction activities in many, many ways. Okay. And another ways or additional way that the campaign is trying to do to achieve the objective is by organizing city to city learning and study tour with role model cities. So they will have an event, they will have meetings, seminars where city who has successfully, okay, city that has successfully implemented certain programs, certain activities in their area, they will share these good stories, they will share this lesson learned, and also inviting other members in the network to come and they share each other experience. And probably from this, they will, the new members or the new cities may have had a similar problem, and they share this learning experience. And another way is by promoting and facilitating access to existing tools and resources. So the campaign, the UNDR Making Cities Resilient campaign, provided a lot of tools, a lot of template, a lot of technique and strategy and document, if you like. And these are all available in their website, where basically everyone can access, particularly city government, local government. They can access, they can learn, and they can try to implement them in their particular city or municipal. And following that also, what is expected to be accompanying this campaign is a high visibility initiative. High visibility initiative, and one of the most famous initiative that coming from this campaign is the 1 million safe schools and hospitals, where they are aiming at upgrading, if you like, refurbishing, retrofitting schools and hospitals to be the last man standing, but the last building standing in terms of disaster, because they will provide shelters and also access to care in the event of emergency. And they also have formulated 10 essentials for making cities disaster resilient, and these 10 essentials are independent to each other. So any cities trying to or planning to join the network, trying to join the campaign, they can start with any of these. They don't have to do all of them. The first one is the essential institutional and administrative work. Okay, so this is where we need to put in place organization and coordination to understand and reduce disaster risk. And financing and resources, assign a budget for disaster risk reduction and provide incentives. Some of the way that we can approach this way is providing incentive for homeowners, low-income families, communities, businesses, and when they adopt approach that help reduce disaster risk in that particular place. And the multi-hazard risk assessment, this is one of the very important area or important element. We need to know what is the risk in our area, and this is particularly why this campaign are aiming at the local government, because the local government is the one that knows best what is happening in the area, the one that knows best what are the risks in their area, and not the provincial government and not the national government, because they only know the general conditions, they only know the general point of view. But the one that knows best is the one closest to the risk, and this is the local government and the society living there. And infrastructure protection and upgrading, retrofitting weak infrastructure, and make sure that they will still operate in terms of disaster occurrence. When after an earthquake, for example, schools need to be standing because they can be used as a shelter. Health facility needs to be standing because they provide the immediate care, emergency care that the community will need after a disaster. Vital facilities, like I said earlier, and then they're also building regulation and land use planning. Building regulations need to be reviewed. Building regulation need to be well implemented, if you like. Yeah, and the land use planning also it takes care also inclusive development, where low income communities are also taken into account in the development. Essential 7, training, education, and public awareness. Not only for government officials, not only for officers who are dealing with disaster, but all stakeholders, including the community, needs to be given a training, educations, and also awareness on the risks in the area, what they are, how they need to be tackled, what they need to do in terms of disaster occurrence, and so forth and so forth. And the environmental protection and strengthening ecosystem. Okay, so this is something like providing a natural buffer to mitigate floods, for example. need to make sure that there's some buffer for floodings, storm surges, and any other hazard which make the city become a vulnerable city. And we can also adapt this to include risk to climate change, for example. And install early warning system and response. Again, depending on the type of disaster in the area, in the city, then an early warning system needs to be there. And early warning system not only talking about, say, equipment, but also knowledge on what to do should warnings been announced. Yeah. And drills, for example, evacuation drills and so forth, they need to be educated, and they need to be managed properly. And the last essentials that the UNDR formulated is the recovery and rebuilding of communities. Because after disaster, we need to ensure that the needs of the affected populations are placed at the center of the reconstructions. And these are the 10 essential for making cities disaster resilience. Any cities wanting to implement them, wanting to join the network, then they can start with any of them. They can find which is the most priority for their particular area, and later on they can start adopting the other essentials, and they can start growing their, say, adoptions. They can start growing their approach in this campaign, and then eventually, hopefully, they all 10 are adopted in the city. And how to do that? And the UNDR also helped with phasing it down into 5 phases. The first phase is organizing and preparing to incorporate the 10 essential. Like I mentioned earlier, this is where we see the priority. We look at what is the priority of the city and start choosing or selecting which area that needs to be improved, which area that needs to be adopted. And then following that is with the diagnosis and assessment of the city's risk. Understanding what is the risk, what are the hazards in the area, and what is the severity level of that particular risk in their area. And again, this is why the city government, the urban government, the local government needs to perform this, because they know the area the best. And once we have the risk assessment in place, then we start developing a safe and resilient city action plan. And when the plan is ready, when we have the plan, then obviously we need to implement them. We need to make actions. Okay, and as with any other actions, with any other project, there's always a requirement. There's always necessity to keep reviewing, monitoring, and updating any mistakes, if you like, to keep changing whatever need to be changed, that because we do not know that 100% in the beginning that things will run smoothly, thing will be correct 100%. No project will have that.
Dr. Hayat, your time only left 3 minutes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And these are the 5 phases of how it can be done. And let's look at what is the impact so far. So in the last 10 years that this program or this campaign has been launched, what is the impacts to the world, if you like, in terms of disaster risk reduction? I present here the figure that taken from the report, the UNDR report, where we can see that this is the types of risk assessment output that is given by the respondent. So in this report, the UNDRR has a respondents of 159 cities around the world, and they are including cities that is part of the MCR campaign and also non-member, if you like, of the campaign. So the result is that in almost all the risk assessment output, we can see that the MCR, or the Making Cities Resilient members, perform better in terms of their risk assessment output, particularly with how to cope with the coping capacity analysis, and then risk map and risk hazard. The member of the MCR perform way beyond the non-MCR. So this is a clear indication that it has a very positive impact. And the next one is about the availability of local DRR strategy. Yeah, so more than 50% of the respondents says that they have in place a DRR strategy plan, and of those indicate that they have a strategy of DRR in place, more than 87%, nearly 90% of those are MCR members. So we can see that this is providing a very good impact to the cities, and hopefully this means a positive approach and positive result toward disaster reduction in the global level in combination. And this is one of the very important aspects as well, diagram result from the study. Lack of financial resource has been indicated as the most problem, why they cannot implement the program fully. Okay, we need to have budget allocation, because budget allocation, then we do not have the fuel to make the program run. And lack of political interest following that, and also the change in the government priority. As with many democratic countries, we will have a government changes in every 4 or 5 years, and that is why in the change of the government, normally a change in policy will follow that, and this change makes a long-term or medium-term even, a medium and long-term policy plan make it a little bit difficult, a little bit more difficult, that priorities keep changing. And political interest as well, and this is very important why this sort of actions, this sort of initiative will need to be made politically interesting. Without political interest, then it will be very hard to get financial resources. It will be very hard to get the government priority plan in that particular area. And no dedicated focal agencies. I'll leave it here, and I will share it with you anyway. Okay, thank you very much for the time.
I'm sorry, Dr. Esri Hayat, because of the limitation of
that's
time,
okay.
so I have to cut the
That's
presentation.
fine.
Okay, we can continue in discussion after this lecture.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esri Hayat, for very insightful presentation, which can be learned about the need to integrate disaster management into public policy for making cities more resilient in facing disaster, that initiated by UNDRR. Okay.
Yeah, I need to stop sharing screen. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I will move to the next presentation by Dr. Nopawan Pangpa. Dr. Nopawan Pangpa is a lecturer and head of public administration program at Burapa University of Thailand. And previously, she was a student at Brawijaya University here, both for master degree and also doctoral degree. Her research for doctoral thesis is about flood management in Bangkok, and she has attended several conferences to present her research, and also has published her works in some indexes journals. And today she will share her work with us with title Flood Management in Thailand. And I won't waste the time, so I would like to invite Dr. Nopawan Pangpa. Please welcome Dr. Nopawan.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity in this event. I am very appreciated. Did you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes,
we can see clearly here.
Okay, thank you. For my section, I will present about the natural disaster in an overview of flood management in Thailand. Usually in Thailand, we face with the hazards such as flood, storm, drought, forest fire, landslide, and extreme temperature. There are two hazards that often occur in Thailand. It is flood and drought. So for today, I would like to focus only on flood. The information of flood in Thailand. There are two types of flood. The first is the fat flood. The fat flood is occurred due to the excessive rainfall within the short periods of time in the mountain area. But usually the mountain area is in the north of Thailand. And the second is the riverine flood. It's caused by the water level in the river exceeds its water retention capacity due to the heavy rainfall. This happens when high intensity rain has fallen in the river and catchment area or in nearby area and drain to the river. So this picture, you can see the geography of the Thailand. Usually, if we look at this picture, we can see the line of the river and the river branches in Thailand. And if we separate to two parts of the map of Thailand, we can separate it into the first part that in the mainland, mostly, not mostly, all of the area in the north of Thailand, in the northeast of Thailand, in the central of Thailand, in the west and in the east. In the first area, the rainfall will be 4 months, but in the another part of Thailand, you can see that it's surrounded by the ocean. So the weather in there or in the southern part of Thailand, the rainy season will take about 8 months and dry season only 4 months. It seems like in Indonesia, if only in the southern part of Thailand. So, and this graph is show the average of temperature and rainfall of the Thailand. You can see that the high rate of the rainfall is start from May until October. But it's not all of Thailand faced with the flood at the same time. It will start from the north part of Thailand and the water flow down to the center part of Thailand. The high risks of the flooding are related to complex river system extending throughout the country. The riverine flooding is common given the west in the center part of Thailand, usually in the Chao Phraya River Basin, and the other river system includes the Ping, Wang, Yom Nan Basin in the northern regions, and also Chi Moon Chao Phraya River, which stimulate seasonal flooding, which also correlate with storms. Usually it's from start from February. So in different areas across country could experience local storms. And in the history of flood in Thailand, we faced with the worst flood in the last decade in 2011. There were 66 provincials from 77 provincials that got the impact from the flood at that time. And according to the World Bank record, it was one of the worst natural disaster event in Thailand that affect to economic system in Thailand. So after 2011, the government aware and try to improve the flood management in Thailand. So after the big disaster occurred in Thailand, they try to formulate the new regulation and the new system for management. For example, they provide the hazard map in the national level, provide a general risk assessment in different level of the administration, provide a guideline for provincial and local authority for developing risk profile to propose to the national level disaster risk management strategy and plan. Enhancing risk assessment capacity has improved nationwide through research development project of Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation, and also increase the cooperation among organizations. It's not only the government sectors, but they try to make the cooperation with the other sectors, especially for technical institutes and academia. Also develop the risk information database. Maintain the systematic collection of data assessing hydrometeorological hazards, which is utilized in hazard monitoring, climate change protection, seasonal forecast, and the annual forecasting of flood risks across the country. And also they formulate the legal foundation of disaster risk management. Before 2011, before the big flood of Thailand, usually we face with another big disaster in Asian country, a tsunami in 2004. So after tsunami in Thailand, we improved and formulate some of the acts. It is it's called the Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Act of 2005. It is the main framework for disaster risk management in Thailand. And after the flood in 2011, they formulate the National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan in 2015 that describe a set of strategy objectives to guide the operationalization of disaster risk management that includes disaster risk reduction, integrated emergency management, effective recovery and resilient building, and strengthen international cooperation, adopting multi-agency and multi-sectoral approaches. And also not in the national level only. At the sub-national level, all of the province and local administrative bodies are mandated to develop respective disaster management plan for their jurisdiction. For the legislative plan and policy in Thailand, we can see this table as the main frame. The first authorized is Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation. Usually they respond for Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Acts, and they take care for all levels. And they do for improved disaster management system of Thailand by clarifying role and coordination among stakeholders, includes provision of disaster risk reduction. And if that department cooperate or work together with other agencies, they're responsible for National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan in national level, provincial level, and local level to outline strategy focus area of disaster risk management, intervention aligned with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reductions, intended to cater for all levels of the government and relevant stakeholders. And next, for the sub-district administration unit, they will take care in the local level, and they have to guide and implementation of the risk management activities at the local level, intended for respective sub-district authorities. And the last one is the provincial authorities. They take care in the provincial level. They have to guide the implementation of disaster risk management activity at the provincial level and implement by province government and supporting stakeholders. During flood, the administration will use the different system. Usually is the general administration based on our regulation and the relevant law. But when we got the flood, the administration that we use will be incident command system. The highest administrator is called incident command and support by joint information officer, advisor or specialist, and also operation cooperation center. And for the administration sector can be separate to 3 sections. The first section includes transportation, firefighting, military, search and rescue. The second is planning section. It includes emergency management, foreign affairs, and legal advisor unit. And the third section, the support section, it includes ICT, infrastructure, social welfare, agriculture, energy, economy, education, culture, natural resources, environment, budget, and donation. And this picture is show us about the level of the administration during disaster. The incident command will be separated along the series of the hazards. There are 4 levels. The 4th level will be used when we face with the extra large scale of the disaster. The Prime Minister will be the commander. And if the lower level, if we face with the large scale disaster, the Ministry of Interior will be the commander. If we face with the medium scale of disaster, it can manage within the province, so the governor and Bangkok governor can be the commander. And the small scale of disaster, the head of local government organization and district chief can be the commander. And usually, if in case of the large scale of disaster, it will be set the emergency support functions. It will be formed to support the emergency management and operation. There are 18 tasks, including logistics, international coordination, medical service and public health, deploying of military equipment, firefighting, critical facilities and infrastructure, information technology, social welfare, and human security. And also, if we focus in the resilience, in terms of the resilience and climate change has been integrated into many sectoral plans and strategy. At the national level, these concerns exist in the 12th National Economic and Social Development Plan, reaffirming the importance of risk-informed and resilient development. And the other is the 20 years National Strategy for Security, Prosperity and Sustainability and Water Resources Management Plan, DE 2018 until 2037, Outline is a framework for guiding public investment. Financing priority includes flood management, increasing and efficient of water uses, and the sustainable management of water supply, which are focused on reducing pollution. And also in the recovery phase or build back better, it includes the recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Thailand made the considerable progress in supporting the development of mechanisms that guarantee efficiency of response and recovery, supported by a system of coordination that identify the role and responsibility of stakeholders involved in disaster response activity. So for run with this, financial needs to addressing in the immediate phase of response and short-term recovery, providing the guidance, construction materials, and skilled professionals to help the affected people. For the metro in Thailand, flood management measure, there are two types. The first type is non-structural measure. The first is flood fighting. Usually they try to increase the number of the volunteers. The second, land use control. In this measure, they try to control the urban expansion, agriculture expansion, and resident area expansion. And the last one, public information and education. Usually, one of the problems for flood management or another disaster in Thailand is about the information. So they try to share the information from the upper level to the local level and try to educate the officer and also the population. Our population have to know about how they prepare themselves for prevent the disaster or how they can prepare themselves before the disaster, during the disaster and after disaster. And the second.
Excuse me, Dr. Nopawa, your time only left 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. And the second type is the structural measure. Usually we try to build like the dies, increase the number of the dies, install more pumping station, increase the damage tunnel and pipe, or increase the retention area, and also try to increase the efficiency of the canal of draining system. For the early warning, usually in different level will be use the different tools, or sometimes the warning system run through agency. So we try to make the early warning system, especially in the local level, to be more effective. So some local level in Thailand, we got some support from the international level to improve the tools and also run the campaign for early warning system. And I think this can will go into the last is usually it is the because of the government try to educate the local people, so they implement the disaster management by using the concept of the community-based management. The villager can prepare well. When they prepare well, it will decrease the damage and number of deaths and affected people. But usually, based on this plan, we can divide for 3 phases. The first phase is before the disaster, and what they do in this phase, usually for prepare tool, equipment, to investigate risk area, to provide about the information, follow the weather forecast, and also monitor and assess the situation. And for the second phase, during the disaster, they try to gathering the community member information, like make a list of the household member and try to inform the community to ready for evacuation and preparing the safe place. And also during the disaster, relate with the nursing unit about provide medical support and search for rescue victim also. And the last phase is after disaster. Okay.
I'm sorry, Dr. Nopawan, because the time is up, so I have to cut the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nopawan, for a very interesting lecture. From this lecture, we can gain knowledge about the policy by Thailand government in managing disaster, particularly flood, from preparedness to post-disaster recovery. And I remind to all the participants, if any of you have questions, please write your question in the chat box or in the comment section. Okay, the following speaker is Engineer Dodi Ruswanda MSCE. And at the moment, Engineer Dodi Ruswanda MSCE is acting Deputy for Emergency Response of BNPB Indonesia. And for his education background, he got his bachelor degree from ITB Indonesia and got his master degree from University of Wisconsin at Madison, USA. During his career in BNPB, he has presented his works in many conferences, formal meetings, and also seminars. And there are more than 25 events, I think. In terms of organization, Engineer Dodi Rusmawa is also a member of FIA-UB or Indonesian Disaster Management Expert Association. And currently, he is a doctoral student at Faculty of Administrative Science, Brawijaya University. And today, Mr. Dodi will make a presentation with title Managing Natural Disaster in Indonesia. And I would like to invite Bapak Insinyur Dodi Rusmawa to deliver his presentation.
Thank you, Putri. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Pak.
So thank you for giving me opportunity to share Indonesia experience in managing disaster management in this country. So let me share the screen first. Do you get my screen?
Yes, Pak Dodi, we can see it clearly here.
Okay, I would like to present regarding the policy and implementation of disaster management in Indonesia, and I'll try to manage my presentation within the 20 minutes. Okay. Okay, the first slide, I will show you about the occurrence of disaster in this country. That Indonesia is a disaster-prone country. We have experienced many disasters, from small to big-scale disaster for the last 12 years, such as earthquake, tsunami, flood, landslide, volcano eruption, and also we have forest fire that happen every year. Number of disasters seems that tend to increase every year. This is only for natural disaster. We don't talk about pandemic yet. It is also determined as man-made disaster in disaster law. Now we're still working on disaster relief of Cyclone Seroja that occurred last month in Nusa Tenggara Timur province. So I will update you about this cyclone later on the following slides. And Indonesia is a very big country managing disaster with 270 million people. Of course, it's not going to be easy work. The next slide, I will tell you about the policy and implementing disaster management in this country. Based on disaster law number 24, year 2007. Based on such a law, there are three conditions of disaster, such as pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster. So I will explain on the following slide what the government have done and what have not done yet. Let's see this slide, how the role of disaster management in National Development Plan. I think this one is important because since 2015, the government has a commitment to consider disaster management plan as one of the priority development sector. And the government consistently pay attention to improve the policy and implementation of disaster management, including providing sufficient fund, particularly in order to expedite the recovery process aftermath of disaster. And the government also increased the national resources capacity for disaster management year by year. And now national resources capacity to respond is getting better and better. In response system, we rely on availability of on-call budget. We call it Dana Siap Pakai. This is the ready for use fund only allocated in BNPB. Then how disaster law mandate the government in many as describing in this particular slide, where there are different program activities on every step of disaster cycle. The different program activities on every step of disaster cycle, I'd like to tell you that we conduct all necessary work during emergency response during disaster relief. And the full basic need of affected people as mandated by disaster law, as well as for forced disaster work. The government have successfully done all necessary recovery work aftermath of disaster. For example, for 2018 Nusa Tenggara Barat earthquake, in which the government just finished rehabilitating housing recovery, almost 200,000 houses completed within 16-month period. The same way for the current Nusa Tenggara Timur province cyclone disaster, we are going to speed up the process of recovery, including economic recovery. The issues is regarding the pre-disaster work. We assume that we don't implement it yet as required by disaster law. Why this prevention not doing well yet? Because of lack coordination matters. It seems that it needs to reform many regulations in order to have one integrated policy. For example, we still don't have a national integrated early warning system yet, and also need to speed up the disaster management education in community, and also scaling up the existing Desa Tangguh Bencana, and some other prevention-related program. How the public agency and line ministry conduct disaster management from national level down to local level. This slide shows us that interagency framework in conducting disaster management, as describing in this particular chart, there are policy and strategy of disaster management established by national level, and implementation work conducted by the governor in provincial level, as well as Bupati in regency level. If disaster occur, governor and Bupati will conduct the disaster response management, and BNPB will coordinate all national resources to deploy to effective disaster emergency response, as we have done in last Mamuju earthquake, and also now happening in Nusa Tenggara Timur province that's still working on. During disaster emergency response, similar to what happened in Thailand, as Dr. Nopawan explained, we also have the following standard of emergency organization requirement by BNPB regulation, and all local disaster relief activities managed by the governor and Bupati in local level. And this SOP also endorsed by the Interior Minister regulation. To make the emergency response management going well, we also have SOP, what we call as National Cluster System, that all disaster relief work will be divided into 8 cluster work, and each cluster would be coordinated by a high-ranked government official, as mentioned in BNPB cluster regulation. We adopt this cluster system normally when big-scale disaster occur. For example, in last 2018 Pandeglang tsunami, in Palu earthquake, and also in NTB earthquake last time, we use effectively this cluster system in order to make emergency response management be efficient and effectively. Let me show you the NTT, what's going on in NTT province that hit by Cyclone Seroja last month. This particular disaster was affected 21 kabupaten kota and caused 182 people lost their life. And up until now, we have been working on disaster relief effort where BNPB has deployed 7 helicopters for logistic drop in remote and isolated area through the province. TNI also deployed 5 warships to help for logistic transportation. This is the most challenging response work because some of the 21 kabupaten kota located in separated different islands that only helicopters dropping logistic will be effectively work to expedite the disaster relief work. This slide will explain about how this disaster recovery policy in this country. According to the disaster law, the central government and local government must be responsible for a speedy recovery process. The recovery policy based on BNPB recovery guideline, and this analyze and prepare the suitable recovery plan, and finally to have the official final recovery plan. Expecting funding would be approved by the Ministry of Finance. Based on the last 12 years experience, the government always provides sufficient recovery fund in order to achieve Build Back Better recovery. This is also the scheme for the budget allocation and how the local level propose the budget allocation up to BNPB, and then BNPB will continue it to the Minister of Finance. At this, my final slide, that I will tell that among 3 types of the disaster cycles, only in pre-disaster cycle that the government does not implement yet programs, activities that related to the prevention program because it needs some regulation reform in order to have one collaborative governance in disaster prevention policy. By having this upcoming integrated prevention policy, it will save more life when disaster happen. By the way, this process of reform is still going on right now, and let's see what happens in the near future. I think that's going to be my last slide, and I'm looking forward to having question and comment from all participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bapak Insinyur Dodi Ruswandi. I'd like to say sorry for my spelling mistake before. I call Bapak Dodi Ruswanda. Sorry, Pak, because the right name is Bapak Dodi Ruswandi. I'm sorry, Pak Dodi. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for very nice sharing about BNPB and its role in disaster management in Indonesia. And to all participants who have questions for the speakers, you can write down your question in the chat box or in the comment section. Okay, now we are in the last speaker, Mr. Oscar Radian Danar, PhD. Mr. Oscar Radian Danar, PhD is a lecturer in Brawijaya University since 2012, just after he completed his study in Brawijaya University for undergraduate and master program respectively. Then he achieved his PhD from Tohoku University, Japan. And up to this moment, he's still actively doing research with various topics such as disaster governance, administrative reform, dynamic and collaborative governance. And he also produced some publication from his research work, including a book titled Disaster Governance that has been launched a few months ago. Besides that, he is also a member of Indonesia Association for Public Administration. And today he will present his work with title Strengthening Dynamic and Collaborative Governance in Non-Natural Disaster, Managing COVID-19 Pandemic. Okay, we can't wait any longer to listen his lecture. I'd like to invite Mr. Oscar Danaradian, PhD, to start the lecture.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Dr. Tri Yumarni, for the nice introduction. Hopefully you can hear my voice clearly. Yeah.
Yes, it is clear.
Okay,
clear.
Thank you. So, okay, I would like to share screen my presentations. Oh, something problem. Okay, hope you can see the PowerPoint that I already shared screen. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Professor Andi Wijaya, the head of public administration, as the host of this international joint lecture. A very, very nice and important international joint lecture. Fellow speakers, Dr. Esri Hayat, Dr. Nopawan, Bapak Dodi Ruswandi, and of course, moderator who lead this event, Ibu Dr. Tri Marni. all participants, many of seniors attend these events, professors, seniors, college, friends, all participants across countries from Philippines, Thailand, Nepal, and all participants who attend this international joint lecture. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, I will present my work that already mentioned by Ibu Dr. Trimo Yumarni. It's entitled Strengthening Dynamic and Collaborative Governance in Non-Natural Disaster. And I will specifically talking about the managing COVID-19 pandemic. So my presentations will be quite different with previous presentation they already presented by Dr. S.D. Hayat, Dr. Nopawan, and Bapak Dodi Rusmandi. So in my presentation, I would like to discuss non-natural disaster that we are now having, and it's really, really serious. Yeah. Because as mentioned by United Nations for Disaster Risk Reduction, previously is UNISDR, the disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of community or society at any scale due to hazardous events interacting with condition of exposures, vulnerability, and capacity, leading to one or more of the following: human, material, economic, and environmental losses and impacts. And according to our law, Act number 24, year 2007, that previously mentioning a lot by Bapak Dodi, but here I would like to stress that in our law, we have actually three kinds, but I will discuss only two kinds of disasters. First is natural disaster. It means that disasters caused by an event or a series of events caused by nature. Yeah. So nature, that's why it's natural disaster. Among others, it's earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, floods, drought, hurricanes, landslide, and other natural disaster. And the second one is a non-natural disasters. A disaster caused by a non-natural events, including technological failures, modernization failures, epidemics, and disease outbreaks. So the determinations of COVID-19 as a national disaster in Indonesia is stated in the Presidential Decree number 12, 2020 concerning the determination of non-natural disaster for the spread of COVID-19 as a national disaster. As you may see in the left picture, that's the Presidential Decree that mentioned COVID-19 as a non-natural disaster, as a national disaster in Indonesia. So this is reported cases and deaths by country or territory. I took it from the World Matters data by 27 April. So as we can see from this table, USA still the largest new case, the largest total cases, 32 million people infected by this COVID-19. In USA, around 50,000 new cases every day. Total deaths already 587,000 around. And you can see from this table, all of the others aspects such as new deaths every day, total recovered, active cases, serious critical, death per 1 million population, total tests, population, etc. And then the second one, and this is a very, very serious cases right now facing by India, because they have what is called now by a third wave of COVID-19, because they have now 17 million cases, and you can imagine that right now they have each day, per day they have 362,000 new cases. I will discuss it later on, what is happening in India. But right now, many countries is worried, yeah, about the situation in India, because the daily cases is really highly, rapidly, yeah, happened in India. And in Brazil, third one, French, the fourth one, and UK, yeah, the place of Dr. Hayat. It's in 7 places with 4 million total cases, about 4 million total cases. And now Indonesia, yeah, we are in the 18th place. We have about 1.6 million cases. And Philippines, yeah, in 26th place, yeah, with about 1 million cases. And then this is low case countries, yeah. South Korea, for example, in the 86th place, it is about in total 119,000 cases. And China, right now, as the actually quote unquote source of this COVID-19, is right now very low, yeah, COVID-19 infected cases, and placed in 95th, yeah, positions with about 90,000 total case. And Singapore, Thailand, yeah, Dr. Nopawan, actually have actual low infected cases, yeah, 59,000. And Taiwan is very low, with only about 1,000 total cases. So here, before I continue to the collaborative and dynamic governance as my main focus today, yeah, so I would like to discuss the disaster governance, yeah, a concept that I believe that this is a very important in managing COVID-19, specifically, but also disaster generally. So the term of disaster governance has gained popularity because it recognizes that a broad and diverse set of actors contribute to risk reduction and resilience. So it's mean the actors that contribute to risk reduction and resilience is not only single actors, but it should be a diverse set of actors. So that's why governance is very important, because in managing disaster risk and in disaster risk reduction, we need a diverse set of actors. This is according to Tierney. And then another scholars such as Rajib Saw, Alan Siwatari mentions that internationally, the centralization of disaster governance is also important, because right now there is an increased role for local governance and civil society actors in disaster risk reduction. And Jonathan Lass also mentioned that disaster governance is the way of society as a whole manage its full array of disaster risks. And I myself, in my book, I mentioned that the concept of disaster governance focus on governance concept to build disaster resilience and risk reduction. It is collaboration among various actors and sectors at multiple levels, national and subnational levels, to manage and reduce risk caused by disaster. And next is about the frameworks of collaborative governance and the importance of this framework in managing COVID-19 pandemic. As we can see in public administration discourse, yeah, public administration science. Yeah. So we have now an emerging framework that discussed by a lot of scholars, namely collaborative governance. This is one of the model and frameworks, yeah, provided by Emerson, Nabachi, and Bawah. They mention collaborative governance, the process and structures of public policy decision making and management that engage people constructively across the boundaries of public agencies, levels of governance, and all the public, private, and civic spheres in order to carry out a public purpose that could not otherwise be accomplished. Another framework, for example, is also popular among public administration scholars, is from Ansel and Guess. They mention collaborative governance is therefore a type of governance in which public and private actors work collectively in distinctive way, using particular process to establish laws and rules for the provision of public goods. Here you can see the framework and also from the Emerson framework. And why it is significant in managing disaster, particularly COVID-19, non-natural disaster. So collaborative governance involving state and non-state actors working together in consultation and decision-making amid pandemic COVID-19. As I mentioned in the beginning, in the previous slides, one of the countries that can successfully, we can say, managing this COVID-19 is South Korea. And according to Pan Soo Kim, he mentioned that why South Korea successfully managing this COVID-19, it is because the implementation of this collaborative governance. South Korean government respond to the crisis quickly and also not handle it bureaucratically and arbitrarily, because in collaborative governance, we really should be not bureaucratic. So the government should be inclusive, and open to all of the stakeholders. For example, in late January, so you can say it is a very quick response. In late January, because coronavirus outbreak start around in the end of December, but in late January, the Seoul and Daegu cities and Gyeonggi province each organized a coronavirus task force. The task force already formed at that time in January 2020, very quick to operate an emergency prevention operation system. And professional views, so this is outside the government, professional views were actively sought via consultation and accepted in the policy formulation and the implementation process. In order to supply the necessary tools and methods for testing, tracing, and treating COVID-19 in a timely manner, KCDC, the Korean Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, share a health-related information with healthcare equipment manufacturers for the production of required items such as diagnostic kits and respirators, which will help in the dealing with the infectious disease effectively. So, lesson learned from South Korea, the government collaboration with public and private sector health-related organizations such as health clinics, hospitals, laboratories, and research institutes, health medical societies and associations, military health medical personnel, international organizations have been an essential part of managing multifaceted infectious disease control. So thus, it is fair to say that the South Korean government implementing this collaborative governance, but actually collaborative process in South Korea doesn't take place immediately. There is a process that makes the collaboration process optimally. As argued by Ansel and Guess, Emerson, Nabachi, Balog, collaborative governance requires a process and a system that covers it. Collaborative governance in South Korea is well implemented for several reasons. And actually, one of the main reasons is because previously, the South Korean government already faced a serious outbreak and pandemic. It's called SARS and MERS case. So in addition, face-to-face dialogue is conducted regularly, particularly after the SARS and MERS cases. So the trust building is already conducted for a long time to build a trust from the society. Okay, that's about collaborative governance. Next is about the dynamic governance in managing COVID-19. So dynamic governance is a framework proposed by Neo and Chen, that mention the government need three capabilities. It's thinking ahead, thinking again, and thinking across, to face future uncertainties and external practice. And that's why the government need to conduct agile process and need to have an able people, so that they can have these capabilities. And these capabilities could create an adaptive policies to create a dynamic governance. So this is a general framework. We can learn from these adaptive policies and dynamic governance concept in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, December 31, 2019, right away after the at that time pneumonia case in Wuhan, China, and it exposed at that time, the Taiwan's government already conducted early detection. And January 2nd, 2020, the Taiwan Centers for Disease Control already setting up a team. So it's a very, very dynamic, adaptive, and very agile from the Taiwan government to address the COVID-19. And in 20 January, the level 3 of the CECC was established to integrate resource. And January 23, the level 2 of the CECC was established since the first case of COVID was confirmed on January 21. And February 27, the level 1 of the CECC was established due to the global epidemic situation that getting worse, and the Minister of Health and Welfare was designated by the Premier as the commander to coordinate and mobilize resources. So we can see from the Taiwan case, we have adaptive policies here as a result of dynamic governance. And lack of dynamic governance, particularly lack of thinking again as one aspect of dynamic governance, happened in India. Because of this lack of thinking again capability in India, we can see here the daily cases, particularly as I mentioned previously, by data that I get from the World Matters, April 27, there is 362,000 and 902 cases occurred in India, a very, very high, the highest one during this pandemic history happened in India right now. What happened in India? So before talking about what happened in India, thinking again is very important. Thinking again capability as one aspect of dynamic governance need to think about the environmental turbulence and change that can make past policies outdated and ineffective, even they had been carefully and thoughtfully chosen. So thus there is a need to think again existing policies and programs to assess whether they are still relevant to the national agenda and long-term needs of society. So before the current COVID-19 third wave, by the government of India was relatively successful in suppressing the spread of COVID-19 virus through effective policies. As you can see from this graphic, they relatively successfully suppressed the COVID-19 case in India. But the Indian government tends to underestimate the COVID-19 by relaxing the implementation of health protocols. No mask, no social distancing, COVID-19 protocol tossed away. Particularly, the government allows the ritual called by Mahakam that triggered the COVID-19 tsunami. So Mahakam is kind of ritual that make the people gathering together. And at that time, without social distancing and without COVID-19 protocol. And currently, the Indian health facilities are unable to accommodate COVID-19 patients. So that's why a strengthening dynamic governance in managing COVID-19 are very important. Important to be developed, and it is important to integrate in disaster management process. When governments develop the capabilities of thinking ahead, thinking again, and thinking across, and embed this into the path, policies, people, and process of public sector institutions, they create learning and innovations in governance that facilitate dynamism and change in uncertain world, and in the end, produce adaptive policies. So the previous model, quote unquote, of disaster management that consists of, for example, mitigation, preparedness, emergency and recovery, and reconstruction should be considered again. Yeah, because from COVID-19 pandemic, we learned that we should improve the existing disaster management model. We should improve the dynamic governance process and the collaborative governance process. So this is the concluding remarks of my presentations, because before Dr. Triyumarni remind me, so I will I will finish my presentations. So the concluding remark first: collaborative governance framework and actions are critical in DRR, both natural and non-natural disaster. From South Korean case, we learned that collaborative governance involving various actors is essential for handling the COVID-19 pandemic. Dynamic governance, consisting of able people, agile process that pay attention to future uncertainties, external practice, and capabilities, thinking ahead, thinking again, thinking across, is vital and relevant to produce adaptive policies in disaster risk reduction, in this case, COVID-19 pandemic. From this preliminary study, countries with successfully implemented collaborative governance and dynamic governance is relatively succeed in managing COVID-19. So that's why, according to my opinion, strengthening studies on non-natural disaster governance is pivotal, particularly by integrating the governance approach into disaster risk reductions. And then this presentation only focus on collaborative governance and dynamic governance. It has touched any other governance concepts such as smart governance, sound governance, multi-level governance, or other governance concept. And it is very, very interesting, yeah, to discuss regarding how to integrate governance concept into disaster reduction. And of course, it will be beneficial in managing non-natural disaster. That's all for my presentation. Terima kasih, Kopkum Krab, Malami Selamat Po, Kamsahamnida, Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. Would like to give it again to the moderator. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Oscar Adiandana, PhD, from the wonderful presentation. You can finish on time your presentation. It's wonderful. And again, I would like to say thank you for all speakers who have delivered very insightful lectures today. And now we can start the discussion session. If any of you have questions for the speakers, please write down your question in the chat box.
Langsung boleh ya?
Okay. There is a question from Dr. Alfi Harismanto.
Okay, thank you very much for chance. Okay, in the implementation to overcoming the disaster mitigation, we need the government in each country needs certain huge budget allocation. Yeah. The problem is we know in one side the victim of the disaster needs victim of the disaster needs they can be cured soon as soon as possible. But in the other impact is the problem of budget accountability process. It means the problem of transparency. I want to know what the government in Thailand, presented by Achan Nopawan and by Mr. Ainul, in London, yeah. How the government to manage this budget allocation. In one side, yes, we need to soon as possible to cure the problem, but in other problem, okay, the problem is about sometimes we are afraid about transparency. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Alfi. May Dr. Nopawan can respond to the question from Pak Alfi.
Thank you for Pak Alfi for your question. Usually for the budget allocation in Thailand, every level, I mean in national level and subnational level, we can separate the budget into two terms. Like the first is the routine budget allocation, and the second one is like the emergency budget allocation. For the emergency budget allocation, usually we use in the emergency case, and the emergency case is include about all kind of disaster. So usually the process for transfer the money is not a big problem if under the number of the budget that they have. But if some case, if they spend or would like to spend over the budget that they have in the ministry level and in the national level, will solve the problem to loan from the outside country or another ways that they can solve the problem.
Thank you, Achanam. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nopawan. And now we move to the next question. Please, Pak Bayu, to help me to share the question in screen. Okay, this question is from Sardiansa. I am student in Bachelor Program of Public Administration in Brawijaya University, and the question is how to determine the status of emergency of disaster and what are the funding criteria for disaster. Because Sardiansa didn't write to whom this question is addressed, maybe all the speakers can respond this question. Or first, maybe from Bapak Dodi from BNPB. Bapak Dodi?
Yeah, okay. So thank you for the comment and question, Sardiansa. So he or she asking about this, how to determine the status of emergency of disaster. Okay, in Indonesia, so in disaster law, there are three status of emergency. First, the national status of emergency declared by Mr. President. And the second one is the provincial level of emergency declared by the governor. And the lowest one is the regency level of emergency declared by Bupati. And the level of emergency status is depend on the scale of the disaster impact. And normally, if one small disaster occur in one particular regency or kabupaten, no such big impact, let's say no casualties and so on, and usually they only declared by level of regency, state of emergency. But if the disaster occurrence happen more than 2 or 3 kabupaten, and normally the status of emergency will be made by the governor. For example, when the wildfire or forest wildfire happen in every province, it's normally a state of emergency declared by the governor. When the status of emergency go to the president level, if there's so many, more than 2 or 3 or 5 probably, province impacted by such a disaster, like the pandemic right now, so that's going to be declared by the president after recommendation from the BNPB. I think this the way the mechanism were according to the disaster law to determine the level of disaster. Am I asking? Am I answer your question, Sardincia?
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Dodi. And any from other speakers, maybe will give or add a response to this question. Pak Oscar? If not, okay, we move.
Okay.
Pak Oscar, okay, Pak Oscar, please.
Okay, I think it's the one who have authority, quote unquote, who answer the question is already answered the questions, Pak Dodi. Yeah. But in my opinion, just as I present previously, yeah, regarding funding criteria and budgeting process, according to the dynamic governance frameworks, yeah, one of the most important things is how we can create a flexible, yeah, effective, efficient, and not bureaucratic budgeting process. That's a very important, I think. That's very important point, because when we discuss and talk about disaster, of course, yeah, in emergency situation particularly, they need very quick, fast, agile response, yeah, from the government that can help them, yeah, to manage the situation. I think this is my point, because sometimes, yeah, because of the bureaucratic and because of the procedure, of course, it's important, yeah, rule-based, yeah, bureaucracy, but it's not enough, yeah, rule-based bureaucracy, but we have to be dynamic, yeah, in managing disaster, particularly in emergency process. That's my response, Ibu Dr. Timian. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Oscar. Okay, we move to the next question. Please, Pak Bayu, to share the question in the screen. Okay, this question comes from Megova Salsabila, Universitas Brawijaya. And this question is addressed to Mr. Dodi from BNPB. As we know that some disaster happen in Indonesia, such as flood that usually happen at the early of the year. How BNPB overcome with it? Any preventive solution from BNPB to avoid flood in some cities in Indonesia, such as make any collaborative action with some stakeholders, maybe? Thank you for the opportunities. Okay, Pak Dodi, please give response to this question.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think this is a very good question. Okay, if we talk about the flood, we talk about the urban development. I think our speaker, Dr. Ezri Hayat, told us about how the city growing, and if you design, you arrange the city with a good plan, and then probably in the long term, in the future, you're gonna being away from the flood itself. It means that if we want to prevent from the flood, I think we have to restrict to the city special planning, and sometimes this one is not followed by the people. And the other one is urbanization, right? And the flood occurred always hit in the area of the city, this happen every year. Once the people moving from the outside and they reach the city, and then they select the very cheap land, and then usually the very cheap land located along the river, and that happened year by year, and then after 5 or 10 years they're hit by the flood. I think we cannot blame the flood. Actually, we blame the people who select to live in the along of the river. Basically, the location of their live is beneath the river itself, because you know that every 10 or 20 years there is a period of time that the flood coming.
Left arrow.
This is the problem in any city or any big city in the world. The flood coming because the people living society along the river, and then they not follow the city spatial planning as well. That's probably my answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Dodi. And now the next question from Pak Bayu. Okay, this question is addressed to Dr. Esri Hayat and to Mr. Dodi from the NPB. I am Aulia Rahman from Brawijaya University. As we know that Indonesia has planned to move the capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan, since this location well known as disaster-free. So how we can making this new location more resilient, and how to protect this place if the natural disaster maybe doesn't exist. Okay, the first opportunity I give to Dr. Esri Hayat to respond to this question. Dr. Esri Hayat, please.
Thank you very much. Very interesting questions. Yes, city Jakarta, the capital city, will be moving to Kalimantan, and it is a clean sheet. So when we have a clean sheet, then please make sure that this time we do it properly. This time that the government working hard in details and how the city will be planned and how the city would develop in the future in the medium, long term, and probably in very long term. And we can learn from Singapore, for example, which the current layout of the city, the spatial planning of the current layout, pretty much still represent or reflect the original layout of the city planning when, as I think it was Raffles was in charge to design Singapore, and they stick with that. And this can be a learning point as well from us, the neighboring countries, when we are moving to Kalimantan, then make sure that we have proper plan in advance. And with regard to disaster, I don't know whether this is a good news or bad news for the, say, disaster risk reduction effort in general, because sometimes you need the high officials, you need them, the politicians, you need them to be in the center of disaster to get the attention. Whilst it is probably safe that in terms of that the government can still run in terms of disaster, being away from disaster can psychologically give an attention in the opposite direction. So hopefully this is not the case, and hopefully this will be still a good direction for disaster risk reduction in Indonesia in general. I think that's my point. Probably Pak Dodi could add some more. Thank you.
Okay, Pak Dodi, please.
Yeah, following the Pak Esri Hayat about the new city, new capital city. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the risk mapping. Okay, so according to the statistic, hazard happened in the Kalimantan, and the location of our upcoming capital city is normally free from the haze, because we only have 3 provinces that wildfire happen every year, that West Kalimantan, South Kalimantan, and Central Kalimantan. East Kalimantan not included in that hazard. So if we based on the wildfire hazard, the new location of our capital city is good. And the other one, if another hazard is very close to the East Kalimantan is earthquake line. Okay, they're also in the eastern part of the Balikpapan. That also there are fault line of earthquake there, but statistically the magnitude happened the last 1 years, last 100 years, I think, it's not so big. So I think based on our risk mapping, the location I think is suitable to being away from the hazard itself. The problem only how to design the location so can be prevent from the potential flood when the surrounding area will be growing in the 10 or 20 years later. There will be we have to take consideration of that. That's my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Dodi and Dr. Esri Hayat for the response. Okay, that was the last question for this discussion session. And from this lecture today, we can conclude that we able to learn about disaster management in several aspects. According to Dr. Esri Hayat, to build resilient cities through public administration could be done by implementing 10 essentials which are needed, like institutional and administrative framework, multi-hazard risk assessment, and so on. And from Dr. Nopawan, we all can enrich our knowledge about how Thailand government managed the flood in Bangkok. There is a lesson learned on how better by develop disaster prevention and mitigation plan that can be implemented across villages and communities. Additionally, the most important things for us is how to build forward better in doing disaster mitigation to make our communities more resilient in the future. All of us can take part to do that by supporting the BNPB programs and the programs that I explained before by Bapak Dodi Ruswandi. And the most actual topic we have learned today is the importance of collaborative governance in managing COVID-19 pandemic by practicing thinking ahead, thinking again, and thinking across to make a change in policy that more adaptive and dynamic. And we can learn from several countries which is already implemented. Okay, finally, we are in the end of the event. And I will invite Professor Andi Vestawijaya to officially close this lecture and also to present e-certificates for all speakers. Professor Andi Vesta,
thank you, Putri. I'm glad to see you today and to wait and see the presentation from all speakers today. Very valuable and very fruitful knowledge and science have been transferred to us. Congratulations, and we are hoping that will bring benefit to all of us here today. And for that thing that we want to give up very high appreciation to all speakers, and we present our certificate for appreciation, yeah, to all the speakers. Please, Pak Bayu, to let's share one by one. The first one we will present to Bapak Insinyur Dodi Ruswandi, MSCA. Thank you, Pak Dodi, for the participation today as a speaker.
Thank you. Million thanks, Prof. Andi Fefta.
Thank you, Pak Dodi. I hope that your valuable knowledge will be bring benefit to all of us. Thank you. And then also to Dr. Ezri Hayat, Bapak Ezri. Bapak Ezri Hayat.
Thank you very much, Pak. Makasih. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Pak Ezri Hayat, for the participation today. Very valuable knowledge and practice that you already said to us. And then Dr. Nopawan. Dr. Nopawan.
Thank you so much, Pak Andy.
Yeah, thank you for today. And this is very good moment that we can see again, and then I think very valuable knowledge that you already transferred to all of us. And the last, not at least, not the least, Pak Oscar Radian Danar, MAPPSD. Thank you, Pak Oscar.
Thank you so much, Prof. Andi, our elected dean.
Okay, thank you. All of the presenter and also to the moderator, I think you already did a well done job today, Ibu Tri Yumarni. Thank you for being to be the chairperson today, Pak Ibu Tri.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Andi.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, we can meet again for the next session, international lecture series 4, that we will decide what the topic for the next session. Thank you. And then Kopkunka for all the participation from Thailand, Cameroon. I also see from Myanmar, from Philippines, from Nepal. 6 countries already joined, and 188 institutions already covering about 1,130 people already registered in this session, out of them in the YouTube link. Thank you.
Okay.
Andi.
Thank you very much, Professor Andi Fefta. Once again, thank you very much for your attention to all participants, and thank you very much for all speakers who share knowledge and experience here. I will close this event, this lecture. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih semuanya, Pak Dodi, Pak
Thank you. Terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Bang Esri, Pak Dodi.
Sampai jumpa lagi,
Canop,
Pak ya.
all
Semoga
participants.
masih
Thank
bisa
you so
ketemu
much.
kapan-kapan.
Amin, Insyaallah.
Makasih Pak Hayat.
Makasih sama-sama, Pak.
Salam untuk keluarga semua di sana di Midus Pro ya, Pak.
Amin. Insyaallah sampaikan.
Alhamdulillah, terima kasih.
Hey, bye-bye everyone. I will leave.
Alhamdulillah, Acanop masih di sini, Acanop Pawan. Thank you, Acanop Pawan.
Yes, thank you so much, Pak Andy.
Thank you for the contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Nopawan.
I see you last time. I'll see you next time.
Okay, see you.
And my regard to Prof. Sambrit, to Acan Anurat, to your new dean, because you have a new dean now,
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Pak Dodi, terima kasih Pak Dodi sudah sharing in knowledge, Pak Dodi.